Ever find yourself, like, struggling to express gratitude? You want to show appreciation, but a simple thank you just doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
Well, today's deep dive might offer some unexpected inspiration.
Right.
We're heading back to ancient Israel,
Right.
cracking open the book of Leviticus, chapter 2,
Oh,
to explore the world of grain offerings.
it might seem a bit niche, but trust me, it's a fascinating window into how people, thousands of years ago formalized gratitude using like everyday ingredients like flour and oil as a bridge to the divine.
Okay, so Leviticus is part of the Hebrew Bible, right?
Yeah.
Laying out all sorts of instructions for rituals and practices.
Yeah.
But we're not going full theology lesson here.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the human element, what these offerings reveal about their values and beliefs.
Absolutely. Think of it like an ancient cookbook,
Okay.
crossed with a cultural anthropology text. Leviticus Chapter 2, verse 1 gives us the basic recipe for a grain offering. Fine flour, oil, and frankincense.
Simple enough. But I bet each ingredient had a deeper meaning, right? Kind of like how we still use bread and wine in certain ceremonies today.
Exactly. The fine flour likely symbolized purity and refinement. The oil represented richness and abundance, and frankincense, well, that was the high-end stuff. And for its aroma, it signified a direct connection to the divine.
So it wasn't just about grabbing whatever was in the pantry.
Right.
These ingredients were carefully chosen to convey a specific message.
Right. And it gets even more interesting when we look at how these offerings were prepared. Leviticus, verses 4 through 7, describes different cooking methods. Baking in an oven, cooking in a pan, even using a frying pan.
Wait, frying pans?
Yeah.
That's kind of surprising. Makes them seem a lot more relatable. Like they weren't just solemnly chanting, but actually cooking this stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think that tells us about the role of food in their rituals?
It's a great observation. It suggests that even within these sacred rituals, there was space for culinary creativity. Perhaps different cooking methods held subtle symbolic meanings. Or maybe it was simply about presenting God with the best of their culinary skills.
Kind of like how we put extra effort into a meal for a special guest.
Precisely. It adds a human touch to these ancient practices.
So we've got our carefully crafted grain offering all cooked up. What happens next? Did everyone gather around for a big potluck?
Not quite. A key part of the ritual involved what's called the memorial portion, described in verses 2, 9, and 16. A portion of the offering was burned on the altar.
So it wasn't about everyone stuffing themselves.
Right.
There was a symbolic element to it.
Exactly. It wasn't just physical consumption. It was about sending a portion up to God, a symbolic act of sharing, expressing gratitude, and acknowledging their dependence on a higher power.
But wait, what about the rest of the offering? Did they just toss it out?
Not at all. Verses 3 and 10 tell us that the priests got to eat the remainder. It might seem strange to us, but back then it reinforced the connection between the divine and the human.
Okay.
It was a shared experience, a symbolic communion.
That's really interesting. It wasn't just a one-way street.
Right.
It was a communal act that involved the priests and, in a way, God all partaking in this offering.
Precisely. It points to a different understanding of the relationship between humanity and the divine, a more reciprocal and intertwined connection.
Okay, so we've got our ingredients, our cooking methods, and the sharing of the offering. But were there any restrictions on what you could include in a grain offering?
Definitely. Leviticus Chapter 2, verse 11 is very clear. No leaven or honey allowed.
No leaven or honey.
Nope.
That seems oddly specific. What was the reasoning behind that?
This is where the symbolism gets even deeper. Leaven, which makes bread rise, could have represented corruption or an inflated ego, things that weren't compatible with the purity of the offering. It's fascinating how this idea of leavened bread representing something less pure is found in other cultures as well, even today.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just an arbitrary rule. It connects to broader cultural and even religious ideas about purity and simplicity.
Exactly. And honey, even though it's sweet and delicious, was also off limits.
Okay.
Honey could symbolize worldly pleasures and distractions.
Bah.
By excluding these ingredients, the offering maintained its focus on the divine, emphasizing purity and a turning away from earthly temptations.
It's like they were saying, look, this offering is for you, God. No ego, no distractions, just pure, unadulterated gratitude.
That's a great way to put it. It was about setting aside those earthly things and focusing on the sacred.
Okay, so no leaven, no honey, but was there anything that was absolutely essential in every grain offering?
You're talking about salt, of course.
Yeah.
Leviticus Chapter 2, verse 13 mandates that every offering be seasoned with salt.
Salt, really? I mean, I get it. Salt makes everything taste better, but was there a deeper meaning behind it?
It was much more than just seasoning. Salt was deeply symbolic in ancient cultures. It represented preservation and covenant, a lasting bond.
Oh,
In many cultures, even today, agreements are solidified with rituals involving salt, like sharing bread and salt, or even shaking hands, a gesture that might trace its roots back to the exchange of salt.
wow, that's fascinating. So sprinkling salt on the offering wasn't just for taste, it was about adding a layer of sanctity, a symbol of the enduring relationship between God and the people.
Exactly. It transformed the offering into something more profound, connecting it to a larger covenant and relationship.
So far, we've been talking about these everyday offerings, but I understand there was also a special type of grain offering, the first fruits offering.
Right. Verses 14 through 16 describe this offering, which involved using green ears of corn, dried by fire and threshed. A beautiful image of the harvest, really.
You know, it makes me think of modern harvest festivals and Thanksgiving traditions. That sense of celebrating the abundance of the earth and acknowledging where it all comes from.
Absolutely. Imagine a farmer taking the very first ripe grains, drying them carefully, and presenting them as an offering.
Yeah.
It's a powerful act of acknowledging God's role in their prosperity and expressing gratitude for the bounty they received. It was a way of saying thank you for the gifts of the earth, acknowledging their dependence on forces beyond their control.
That's a beautiful image. It speaks to a deep reverence for nature and a recognition of their place within the natural world.
And it's a reminder that these ancient rituals, while seemingly distant, tap into universal human emotions and experiences. Gratitude, dependence, the desire to connect with something larger than ourselves.
So we've got these everyday offerings and these special first fruit offerings. It's amazing how much symbolism and meaning is packed into something as seemingly simple as grain.
Right, and we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to uncover about these ancient practices and what they reveal about the people who perform them.
Well, I'm hooked. I can't wait to dive deeper into this world and see what other insights we can glean from these ancient offerings.
Stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the role of the priests, the motivations behind these offerings, and the practical aspects of acquiring the ingredients.
Can't wait. See you in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of ancient grain offerings. We've already uncovered so much about the ingredients and the symbolism behind these rituals, but I'm eager to explore some of the questions that popped up last time.
I'm happy to delve deeper. It's clear you're as intrigued by these ancient practices as I am.
Absolutely. One thing I've been wondering is how often were these grain offerings made? Were they a daily thing or were they reserved for special occasions?
It's a great question, and it seems they had a bit of both. Leviticus Chapter 6, verses 12 and 13 describe a continual grain offering that was to be kept burning on the altar day and night. This wasn't something individuals brought. It was a constant presence at the temple, maintained by the priests.
A continual offering? That's a pretty powerful statement about their commitment to staying connected with God.
Definitely. It highlights how vital this connection was to their daily lives. It wasn't just about grand gestures on holidays or during times of need. It was about weaving that reverence into the fabric of their existence.
It's almost like keeping a constant flame burning, symbolizing that ongoing relationship with the divine. But alongside this always present offering, individuals could also bring their own grain offerings, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that strikes me as so significant is that Leviticus makes it clear that grain offerings were accessible to people from all walks of life. It
Mhm.
wasn't just for the wealthy or the elite. It was something everyone could participate in.
I find that really compelling. It speaks to a sense of inclusivity within their religious practice. Everyone, regardless of their social standing, could express their devotion and gratitude through these offerings.
Precisely. It reinforces the idea that everyone had a place in their relationship with God. It wasn't limited by material wealth or social status.
Okay, so we have this continual offering at the temple, and individuals could also bring their offerings, but what were the driving forces behind these individual offerings? Was it purely out of obligation, or was there something more emotional at play?
The text suggests a variety of motivations, and I think it's safe to say that human emotions haven't changed all that much over the centuries. Sometimes offerings were made in response to specific situations like those purification rituals we touched on earlier, seeking atonement for unintentional sins.
Right, those moments when they realized they had messed up, even if it wasn't intentional. It was a way of making things right, restoring balance in their relationship with God.
Exactly. But offerings were also made as expressions of pure gratitude, thanksgiving for blessings received, or as part of celebrations and festivals.
So it was a way of acknowledging God's presence in their lives, both in times of need and times of abundance.
Precisely. It was a multifaceted way of connecting with the divine, acknowledging their dependence on God's grace and mercy, and expressing a desire for a harmonious relationship.
It's fascinating how these ancient practices reflect such a complex tapestry of human emotions, gratitude, guilt, hope, celebration. It makes them feel much more relatable, even across such a vast expanse of time.
It truly does. It humanizes these individuals and allows us to connect with them on a deeper level. Their motivations and emotions aren't so different from our own. We still gravel with those same feelings and seek ways to express them, even if our methods look different today.
Now, we've talked a lot about the spiritual significance of these offerings, but another question that's been on my mind is, what about the practical side of things? Where did people get the ingredients for their offerings? Was there like a special market dedicated to sacrificial grain and frankincense?
That's a question that has fascinated scholars for centuries. The text itself doesn't offer specific details about procurement, but we can make some educated guesses based on what we know about ancient Israelite society.
Okay, let's put on our historical detective hats. Where do you think people might have sourced these items?
Well, for the grain itself, it's likely that most people would use a portion of their own harvest. Remember, agriculture was the backbone of their society. They grew wheat, barley, and other grains. So it makes sense that they would offer some of their produce to God.
It's like offering the first fruits of their labor, a tangible expression of their gratitude for a successful harvest.
Exactly. It strengthens the idea that the offering was a personal sacrifice, giving back a portion of what they had received.
That makes sense for the grain, but what about the oil and frankincense? Those seem a bit more specialized.
You're absolutely right. Olive trees thrived in the region, so olive oil would have been a readily available commodity. However, frankincense was a different story. It was imported from Arabia or other regions where these aromatic resins were harvested.
So acquiring these offerings wasn't just about what people could produce themselves. It also involved engaging in trade and acquiring goods from faraway lands.
Exactly. It adds another layer of complexity to the picture. These offerings reflect not only their agricultural practices and local resources, but also their connections to wider trade networks and the global exchange of goods.
It's incredible to think about how these seemingly simple offerings were connected to such a vast web of human activity and interaction.
It really is. It speaks to the interconnectedness of their world, even in ancient times. Their religious practices weren't isolated. They were woven into the very fabric of their economic and social lives.
We've got farmers offering their grain, merchants trading for exotic frankincense, priests performing these intricate rituals. It's a vibrant tapestry of ancient life that comes to light through these grain offerings.
And as we continue our deep dive into the final part, we'll explore even more facets of this tapestry, uncovering the hidden meanings and connections that illuminate the world of ancient Israel, and perhaps even offer some insights into our own lives today.
I can't wait. I'm ready to see where this journey takes us. Join us next time as we wrap up our exploration of ancient grain offerings. Welcome back, deep divers. We're wrapping up our exploration of ancient grain offerings in the book of Leviticus. And I have to say, this deep dive has really surprised me.
I'm glad to hear it. It's often the topics we least expect that reveal the most fascinating insights.
Absolutely. We've gone deep into the ingredients, the symbolism, the role of the priests, even the economics of procuring everything. But I'm wondering, if we zoom out a bit, what's the bigger takeaway here? What can we learn from these ancient practices that still resonates today?
That's the key question, isn't it? And what's so compelling is that these grain offerings weren't unique to the Israelites. Many ancient cultures had similar rituals involving offerings of food and valuable goods to their deities.
So it wasn't just this one group doing this. It seems like a pretty universal practice across different cultures and time periods. Why do you think that is?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it speaks to a fundamental human need to connect with something greater than ourselves. Across history, people have sought ways to express gratitude, seek favor, or appease the forces they believed governed their world.
It's like these offerings were a way of bridging that gap between humanity and the divine, reaching out and acknowledging that there's something bigger at play.
Exactly. And it's not just about appeasing deities either. These offerings also served a strong social function. They reinforced communal bonds, created shared experiences, and helped to maintain social order.
Right. We talked about how the priests got to eat a portion of the offering and how the first fruits offering probably involved a community gathering. So it wasn't just a transaction between an individual and God, it really brought people together.
Precisely. Imagine that scene, the community coming together as the first ripe grains are offered, celebrating the abundance of the earth and acknowledging their collective dependence on the forces that provided for them.
It's a powerful image.
Mhm.
And it makes you wonder, what are our modern day equivalents of these ancient offerings?
That's a great question to ponder. Do we have rituals or practices that serve a similar purpose? Perhaps it's volunteering our time, donating to causes we believe in, or even simply expressing sincere gratitude to those around us.
It's interesting to think about how those actions might be our way of connecting with something larger than ourselves, a community, a set of values, or a cause we hold dear.
And just as those ancient grain offerings were laden with symbolic meaning, so are our actions today. What we choose to give, how we give it, and why we give it, it all reveals something about our priorities, our values, and how we understand our place in the world.
It's a great reminder that even seemingly small actions can carry deep significance and connect us to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's baking a cake for a neighbor or dedicating years to a cause, it's all about giving back in a way that feels meaningful.
Well said. And I think that's a fitting note to end on.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive into ancient grain offerings, I encourage you to reflect on those moments in your own life where you've felt compelled to give back, to express gratitude, or to connect with something greater than yourself. What do those actions reveal about what you truly value?
That's a powerful question for our listeners to ponder, and it's a testament to the enduring power of these ancient texts. Even thousands of years later, they can still spark profound questions and insights about the human experience. It just goes to show sometimes the most unexpected topics can lead to the most profound discoveries.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
And to our listeners, until next time, keep diving deep.